welcome to another episode of Getting Hammered. I am your host, Mary Catherine Ham. I'm here with my co-host, Vic Mattis of the Washington Free Beacon. We are your morning show for any hour. We have a lot of news today. Trump trial jury is deliberating. I hope they still are by the time this comes out. If not, we'll do an update. We'll see. We have some news from outside the courthouse where the Biden campaign was active, and a lot of SCOTUS news. Alito clapping back, as it were, on the news cycle. But before we get to all of that, Vic, how you doing?
Hello, Mary Catherine. Yes, I'd like to echo your sentiments, by the way. If you're listening to this podcast or watching it on YouTube, I hope it's 5 a.m. or 6 a.m. and not later in the day, because then a whole chunk of the show might be...
I think we need to remember that we just always break news. You know, this is like...
We do.
And by break news, I mean that we talk about news and then it breaks.
Right. We actually coax it
yes.
into happening. I'm doing fine. I wanted to mention a quick story also from my trip to New Jersey, which is while I was at my father's house, I was looking through my dad's liquor cabinet, as I used to do in high school, and going through that, seeing if I can find a few gems, anything of interest. Every now and then there might be an old bottle of scotch or something to that effect. And I found something very interesting, which was lying on its side, a Magnum, which is 1.5 liter bottle, so double the 750. Of a 1991 Cabernet Sauvignon. That's the good news. The bad news is it was a screw top and it was Sutter Home.
Oh.
From 1991. And I took it from its resting and I thought, I think it's time. I know it's a 33-year-old bottle now to open up and
perfectly
empty
aged.
out. But you know what? I did want to check.
Was it corked? Yeah, you need to check it.
I need to check the price. I wanted to check the price. You'd be surprised how much it fetches now. A Magnum of Sutter Home Cabernet will get you minimum. It'll cost you $8.99 at Walmart.
Okay.
So I didn't even tell my dad that I just emptied that out. I said,
I can't believe you didn't even try it. What did it smell like?
Oh, what did I know? I mean,
did it smell like vinegar?
So it's a full-bodied wine. It's funny, if you go to the Sutter Home website, and I didn't even know it still existed. I thought it had been, that segment, that corner of the market was taken over by Barefoot and any of these other ones. But in fact, it's still there, and they call themselves unabashedly the people's wine. I appreciate that.
That's nice.
But as I got towards the bottom, it was just chunks of sediment.
Oh, no.
Yeah.
No.
I'm like, you don't want that. Probably not a good idea. So my search for
You never want to have to strain your wine.
No, nope. Yeah, I was thinking maybe I can decant it. So my search for the 82 Chateau Margaux continues. That's all I had was this discovery of the Sutter Home 1991. The wine snob that I am. Mary Catherine, how are you?
I am good. Things are going well at the house. I am on one of my once or twice yearly attempts to get my life a little bit more together, which is just a constant process for me, right? You sort of get off the rails after a couple months and then try to get back on the rails. That's what I'm doing in preparation for summer, because I do like to make the most of summer, right? It is my favorite season. I want to fit in as much as possible. So I'm
Lots
on
going on.
One of the things I've done is I've started a folder on my Instagram saved things for summer destinations or things to do in the DC area that pop up. There's, by the way, did you know, a Pixar themed putt-putt over by the wharf right now. So I think we might try that.
I didn't know that.
We also have this gap between when their school gets out and public school gets out that I want to make the most of, because
maximize that.
It will be deserted out there on weekdays.
That's
and we
exactly
can just
right.
Gotta do it. Getting all the things done with no lines, no crowds. So I'll do that. But before I got my life back on track for summer, I had not planned for the last 2 weeks of school, which are really a lot. Are you experiencing the May crush right now?
Yes, my wife and my children are.
Yeah, you're just sort of observing from the outside.
I hear secondhand, oh, she's got this, he's got this. But I have to be told these things.
Oh, yeah.
So, Kate, she keeps track of all their activities.
There's just a lot going on.
It's hard enough to keep track of my own
There are
activities.
theme days and stuff for school.
Yeah,
There are, we turned in, I say we. Look, I make my children do their own work, as we've discussed on the show.
Yeah.
My oldest did a research paper last week. I did edit it for her, and I had her talk me through the changes. I did not make the edits for her. I do occasionally type for her because she hasn't learned to type efficiently yet.
Sure.
So I did in the editing process. She typed the main thing, and then in editing I typed some of it for her. She got a 100.
Oh,
which
a perfect score.
Which, you know, given that her teacher might know what my profession is, I do think it's important that we show well on the research paper. So we got that
good
done.
for you.
There's been some tests that, you know, the memo didn't come to the parents that the test was happening, not because of the teacher, because of my daughter and because of me. Like I could look it up at any time. But we fared pretty well on those too. There was no sinking. We're doing all right. And now there's like Aloha Day at the end of the year. Then my daughter says to me,
is it like a Hawaiian night?
Yeah, the day before school ends, there's like an Aloha Day, and they get to go on the bouncy houses, and they wear vacation clothes. So, but before that, my daughter says to me, Mom, you didn't come to lunch with us this year. Which you're always welcome at lunch. And lunch is quite an affair. And the kids, I should treasure this because the kids still like us to show up at things like that, right?
Mean,
So I understand that that's an honor. And the fact that she's asking me is important. However, the lunch experience is in a room with inhospitable acoustics.
Oh, yeah.
And, 50 to 75 elementary school children at a time. They kind of do it in shifts. And so, like, it's not top of my list of things to do. But she reminded me, and I said, oh, you know what? It's the last normal week of school before the last 3 days are next week. Mm-hmm. And so those are, like, kind of odd days. So I says, last real week of school, I'll put it on the calendar. So today, I even moved Getting Hammered taping so that I could go get lunch at the school. Yeah. And I took a little selfie of myself with the girls. And both kids were in the same lunch shift, so we got to be very efficient about it. And I had lunch with both of them. Couldn't hear anything their classmates were saying, but I did try to chat with them. That's also partly just because I'm old, right? Like, they can probably hear each other.
No, it's pretty loud. It's like it's like if you were at a diner counter and, they joke about this on Seinfeld. If you have more than two people, you don't hear what happens on the other side there. You know?
I had some of the other elementary school students with their fresh ears translating for me. What was that? What did Sonny say over there on the other side of the table? So that helped.
But it's sweet that that you're right, that they still want you there.
Yes, and it was nice, and I got to hang out with them, and I got to see them sort of in their element. And then
it means a lot.
And then I looked at my Facebook memories
until it doesn't.
From last year.
Yes.
And exactly 1 year ago today, I was at the same lunch because also last year I forgot until the very last week of school.
And it was the very same day.
Yes.
It would be funny if it was the same outfit.
To go to my kids' lunch. So the point being, I need a deadline, guys. I need a deadline, and the deadline is the end of the school year, and I make it every year, apparently. I will say last year I made it on the very last normal day of school. So this year I was 2 days better.
Do you eat what they eat? Do you get in line, bus a tray?
No. My kids take their lunches, and I just ate at the house before I got there, and I just hung out and chatted. Yeah.
Oh, I would have eaten. If they would have let me, I would have gone. I would have done the hot lunch. Yeah.
You'll be swapping for Pirate's Booty and cheese.
No, I guess it's a different scene now. But I would have liked to go up and see what they're serving.
Like, hey, I brought Rice Krispie treats. Who wants to trade these? I don't think they trade these anymore because of
peanuts
allergies.
Yeah. That's very true.
Yeah, so it's a different world, Vic.
Yeah, that's right. There's a liability issue there.
Is it Taylor Swift who says you wouldn't survive an hour? Is that who says that?
Yeah.
In the asylum.
Thank you. Jennifer confirms.
Look, my children are like very mid Swifties. Okay, so like I don't get.
I'll tell you,
education.
I am, as you know,
producer Jennifer's laughing at me.
My daughter, of course, is huge. Between Leve and Taylor Swift, loves them both.
I got to get my kids onto this Leve. I
feel
like that's
really,
hipper.
It's really, really cool stuff. But the Taylor Swift stuff is beginning to get into my ears and earworms.
Yes,
and I'll tell you the one song that I keep on. If there's one Taylor Swift song that sticks in my head, it's Paper Rings. You know Paper Rings?
I don't know Paper Rings.
Oh, you know that, Jennifer. Paper Rings and diamond rings. I don't know, but anyway, paper rings. There's a very.
You sound so
I'll tell you
old
what,
right now.
Very old. And
What
people are
did you
screaming at
say,
us.
Sonny?
Yes,
About
paper
the
rings.
asylum?
And it's like, it's very countryish.
It is. Okay, I'm gonna look that one up.
All right. Not so much the
Honestly,
new romantics.
look, the catalog is large.
It's large.
It's like if you just came to the Fast and Furious series, right? Like if you catch up from the first one, you're gonna have a
versus
long
like Furious
journey.
Furiouser, faster and furiouser.
You wouldn't last an hour in the asylum where they raised me. Just so that the audience has an accurate version of that, so that I don't distort your understanding of Taylor Swift.
Is that from the Dead Poets album?
I guess.
Yeah.
I don't know, Jennifer knows.
Oh, Tortured Poets. Excuse me. The Tortured Poet Society?
No, department. Okay,
Oh, the
even
Dead
I know that one.
Poets
All right.
Department. Okay.
That's enough embarrassing
trolling.
ourselves.
I'm trolling. I knew that. But initially I didn't. I thought it was Dead Poets. Okay. Good movie. It's Friday, folks.
Okay, and on this Friday, perhaps the jury for the Trump trial is still deliberating. They were as of this taping, and we wanted to do a little update on the judge's instructions to the jury. So we'd been talking about this, as you all know if you've been listening, but I'll just run over the basic facts. This is called colloquially the hush money trial, or the Stormy Daniels trial, because it began with the sexual escapades of one Stormy Daniels and Donald Trump.
Allegedly,
which led to an NDA signed by Stormy Daniels after said alleged escapades. And then
I always have people sign NDAs for allegations.
Right, exactly.
Yeah.
Then years later, she was paid off $130,000. And this was all, by the way, adjudicated in the court of public opinion, like during his presidency.
Yeah.
Right. So this is like he survived the scandal already, right? The scandal itself.
Right.
But there is an allegation now that 34 times that Trump falsified business records about these payments, calling them legal services. And that
legal expense, I believe.
Legal expenses. Those were all misdemeanors under New York state law.
Right.
Alvin Bragg doesn't prosecute misdemeanors in Manhattan, but he figured out a way to creatively make these misdemeanors into felony charges. And he did that by saying all of these 34 violations that are misdemeanors were in service of another crime.
Right.
And because they were in service of another crime, we can make them into felonies.
So cover-up.
34 felony charges.
And that's how you also circumvent the statute of limitations.
Yes, because the statute of limitations had long passed on the falsifying business documents. Now, it should be noted that the Southern District of New York feds took a pass on any sort of crime here. The Federal Election Commission, the FEC, that would have adjudicated or punished a federal elections campaign finance violation. They decided not to. They didn't even fine him for a violation. So what is the other crime? That's been the question in all of our minds, except for all the legal analysts at MSNBC who are like, this is totally fine. But so we hoped that in the closing arguments, which were 6 hours long from the prosecutors, that we might hear what that crime is. It turns out they sort of announced it, which seems backwards because, of course, the defense should be able to defend against the crime that they announce at the
rather
last
convenient
minute.
To announce the crime at the very end.
I'll read a little bit from Jonathan Turley, who says, at the start of closing arguments, most honest observers were still wondering what the prosecutors were alleging as to the crime that Trump was allegedly concealing with the falsification of business records. Then came the closing arguments. By the way, a little quirk of New York law is that the government goes first and then the defense, and there is no rebuttal.
No.
So whatever the prosecution says stands.
Right.
Whereas in other places, there's a little bit of a chance for the defense to follow up.
In other words, it's the last thing.
It's the last, that
sticks in your mind.
So he speaks, and in the case of Judge Merchan, he didn't sort of come to the aid of facts
No.
in this case. In fact, what happened is that they alleged that pretty strongly that there was a federal campaign violation here. So going into deliberations, the court allowed the jury to be told repeatedly that there were federal campaign violations committed by Trump. That is not true. Putting aside, this is Turley again, the federal government found no basis to impose a civil fine, let alone bring a criminal charge. The court barred a legal expert, that was Brad Smith, who we talked about,
Yep. Former head of the FEC.
who could have shown that no such violation occurred. The jury does not know that. Instead, the judge allowed them to be repeatedly told a false fact that could make it difficult for anyone to acquit. So the federal election thing they're talking about, crime they're talking about, has not been proven. It hasn't even been adjudicated. It hasn't been allowed to be defended against because they attempted with Smith. And basically, Mershon said Smith can only talk about what the definition of the FEC is, and he can't go any further than that. So it was pointless for him to testify at that point. Then we hear that there's a menu of crimes that could be the crime on which all of this hangs.
Yes.
There are 3. And the judge told the jurors that they could split on what occurred, with 4 jurors accepting each of the 3 possible crimes in a 4-4-4 split. The court could still consider that a unanimous verdict, so long as they agree that it was in furtherance of some crime. The instructions do require them to be unanimous on the falsifying of business records to begin with, but they can split on the underlying crime or the crime that this is in service of. Does all of that make sense? I mean, does it make sense the way I'm telling the story? It doesn't make sense for the Constitution, but...
Yes. So one of the things that they've been trying to drive home, when I say they, I mean the prosecution, led by Mr. Colangelo, the former number 3 at the Department of Justice,
yes,
who now conveniently is leading this case, is intent. What was the intent behind the mislabeling of the falsifying of the document? And
right.
by falsifying, we're talking about it like in a business ledger, right?
Right.
I mean, this is, and they wrote legal expense, I guess on 34 different occasions, when in fact you're supposed to write hush money for porn star affair,
right.
is the exact terminology for that. And they're trying to show that it had nothing to do with Trump's concern about shame and embarrassment with his family, but had everything to do with that election that was coming up at that time, even though the check in question to Michael Cohen did not happen until after the election.
Right.
That's what they're trying to convince you of, and that, in your mind, that's the reason, no other reason, strictly because he was trying to steal this election. Also, as you mentioned, because they had the last word, they get to throw out and bandy about NDAs, conspiracy, fraud,
right.
hush money. It's all swirling in your mind.
And again, it's up to the judge to say, okay, well, you can't do that, guys. You can't do that. But
the judge did not.
Judge Mershon is not invested in checking the prosecution.
Judge Mershon, whose daughter is involved, obviously, in Democratic politics.
But he's also a Biden donor.
He himself, yes.
Yeah.
He is a Biden donor, and he has given money to some organizations like a Stop Trump organization, which you could do whatever you want, and it wasn't even a lot of money. You know, for example, if Biden was on trial and the judge gave $5 to Trump, I'm sure they wouldn't care about that.
Yeah,
they wouldn't
care at all.
So what you mentioned about the mixing and matching, and it still counts as a unanimous. This was from John Roberts of Fox, and he says, 4 could agree on one crime, 4 on a different one, and the other 4 on another. He said he would treat 4-4-4 as a unanimous verdict, just as you were just saying. How does that make any sense?
Look, I am not a legal expert, and I did read somewhere that the DA had been suggesting that this might be how they would accomplish this.
Yeah.
When this
I think they will.
When this began.
Yeah.
That doesn't make it correct or constitutional. Apparently SCOTUS has ruled in the past that when you have these sort of things that are linked together, that there has to be unanimity on all of them. Now, I'm not sure how that will play out in a state level court like this, but it seems fair that you should know what you're accused of before. I think that's a tenet, that you should know what you're accused of before you mount your defense.
Yeah. Something called due process.
Mm-hmm,
yeah.
And that unanimity should actually mean unanimity. Now, some were saying, well, they didn't come back immediately, so that's a good sign for Trump. I mean, look, this is a fairly confusing case because it's
34 counts.
Yeah, it's 34 counts. It's a confusing case because they have molded this into a case and twisted it and pretzeled it into a case. Apparently, also, Merchan did not send the instructions with the jury.
Yeah,
which is at his discretion, but seems odd given that this is all sort of confusing. So they keep having to send questions to him. Here's Andy McCarthy talking a little bit about what he thought of the instructions.
I would say we just heard from Jonathan Turley, I think. This is anything but standard. It's the antithesis of standard. The idea that they do not have to agree on what the other crime is. You know, we spent 6 weeks wondering what is the other crime, and at the end, the thud we all get hit with is, you know, there's 3 or 4 of them, and, you know, you could pick one or the other, and they don't have to agree on it. And
let me jump in.
It really seems wild to me.
We think this is wild, but there are people on the other side, as you know, who think that Judge Merchan is
he's killing it up there.
He is just exudes judicial temperament.
Yes.
And I think you have.
Let's hear from Andrew Weissman, who I believe was also an important player in the Russiagate nonsense.
Yes, very important.
So he's obviously a trusted voice on MSNBC. Here he is.
As you've noted, with respect to Judge Merchan, I mean, I am like now, you know, I have like a man crush on him. He is such a great judge that it's hard to see that the jurors wouldn't have the same impression. I mean, you just keep on thinking, if you looked in a dictionary for like judicial temperament, that's what you get.
As I was saying.
It's embarrassing.
Yeah. It is. No, it's Chris Matthews level thrill up my leg when he was referring to Obama. That's what this.
Well, and at least then you were talking about Obama. Good gracious, that guy could talk.
We're talking about Juan Merchan.
Now we're talking about Juan Merchan.
Yeah.
No, thank you. No. By the way, someone like Andrew Weissman and those who support him would look at the likes of me or you and say that we're the big hacks, right? Because we can't possibly see clearly. I can see clearly because I don't like Donald Trump.
Yeah.
And I can look at this clearly and say, despite the fact that I am not a fan, you shouldn't do this to people using the judicial system, just as you shouldn't have done it using the intelligence community and the media operatives and the White House and Hillary Clinton's money on Russiagate.
Yeah, exactly. You know, again, they're constantly warning us that if Donald Trump, you know, is reelected, he's going to weaponize the government, because right now they're not doing that.
No, there's no weaponization.
You mentioned about being tough on Trump. He was on the other day, obviously, and he likes to make his pronouncements. And he has this running theme about, obviously, the terrible situation the country is in with the open borders, per se.
Right.
All the, you know, going from 2.4 illegals under his administration to about 8 million in 3.5 something years during the Biden years. And he always says the same thing, though, that they're letting all these, you know, murderers in and rapists. And then he always says this, which is they're letting them in. What is it? So from mental institutions and insane asylums. Is there a difference between mental institutions bad enough, but now they're going to the insane asylums? You know,
as you know, former President Trump is deeply invested in policy and policy-making decisions. And I think he probably has some thoughts about, which one
right?
is which.
Mental institution would be like, you know, One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest. What was it? Oregon State Hospital. And then insane asylum is like Arkham from Batman, you know. So you have some people who are, you know, a little bit different, you know, slightly off.
If you were talking about policy with Donald Trump, that is how you would
present
present
it. Would say,
yes.
They're letting in the Riddler. And Bane is out there. Okay, so
speaking of the border, can I just
this is
a surprise. This is a surprise to everybody, but let me just spring this on you because it's very little talked about, and I feel like it would be a much bigger story if the roles were reversed in party affiliation and a Republican were president. A former federal firearms instructor who worked at Marine Corps Base Quantico in Virginia is warning the strange arrest of 2 Jordanian nationals in a box truck at the base may have been a dry run to test security outside the facility ahead of a terror attack. The same truck, had it been loaded with explosives, could have been a devastating weapon if it had made it close enough to an occupied building, he warned. Did you hear about 2 Jordanian nationals, one freshly from the border, let in illegally, making a forced entry upon Quantico Marine Base.
Not from the mainstream.
Yeah, that
no.
happened this week. They were pulled aside to like get further inspection, and then they just decided to bum rush
When they talk about
in a large van.
When they talk about all the people that Customs and Border Patrol have been apprehending on the terror watch list, I don't know if they think it's a brag that we captured all these people, because there's also the assumption of if this is how many people you caught now,
right?
How many more
Yeah.
have gotten through?
Yeah. So that was actually, it was a little bit earlier in May, but we're just learning
we're learning about it now.
So strange that it's not a huge story. Military police stopped them at the gate, but the driver allegedly ignored them and then tried to move into the compound. NBD, guys. I believe ICE does have them in custody now, but I'm sure that we'll just let them out pretty quickly, right? I mean, they didn't do any damage. All right, so NBD, guys. All right, back to the courthouse. We didn't get enough into how pathetic that Biden campaign event was outside the courthouse.
A stunt. It was a stunt.
So just why, after many, many months of saying, oh, well, this is a very serious legal matter and it's not political for us. And like, aside from an occasional tweet that was in bad form, referencing the trial,
right?
They've mostly stayed on that message. And then the day before deliberations, they freaking parachute in there with an old actor and a whole setup and a press conference in front of the trial. What are we doing?
As the jury is getting set to go and deliberate, they decide now is the time to weigh in. And we're not here to talk in front of the courthouse about this particular trial. No, we're talking about Donald Trump as a threat to democracy, not just to the city of New York, as this great actor was pointing out, not as a threat to America, but to the planet. So that's what we should do.
Let me also say that that press conference is to Robert De Niro's talents as Twitter is to Stephen King's talents.
Yeah.
Like, once you let these guys out of the realm in which they are extremely good, and then they think they can do anything extremely well.
Takes.
Oh, the takes, the performance. I mean, that was a horrendous performance.
It was, at some point, I'm watching De Niro get into this tussle with Trump supporters. And they're baiting him. They're baiting him by saying things like, you're all washed up. And you know that's just making him angrier.
I mean, who thinks you're going to go in front of a New York crowd? I don't even care if it's a New York crowd that's supportive of you and that you're not going to get some heckling. Like, you're, of course, I would be prepared for that if I went out there. That people making fun of my hair or something. By the way, I got a haircut. You guys can see it on YouTube.
It's very nice. Yeah, very nice.
That's how we get people to
short,
the YouTube.
But not too short. You should see the hair. It's very
at
nice.
Getting Hammered Podcast on YouTube. No, I would be prepared to be yelled at. And this guy is just, I mean, look, he's getting on up there. He's feeble, much like the president.
Yeah, two octogenarians. Sure.
And I do wonder if it's like they thought they were going to get this infusion of like Hollywood cool.
Yeah, because they got a celebrity.
And no, that Hollywood cool needs to be relegated to a red carpet.
Yeah.
Or presenting an award. And at this age, does not need to be giving press conferences.
No, down on Center Street, you know, where there's all, and they're asking, why are you here? Are you here about this, you know, about the trial? And no, they kept on saying, no, this is, and again, they waited until now to decide to just, you know, this tells you the state of the Biden campaign, by the way, that they're coming up with all sorts of random ideas, try to see what sticks on the wall.
So that was my thought after I processed how insane this looked.
Yeah.
This is desperation.
Right.
And they're this desperate in
that they
almost June of election year against an opponent that, let's face it, they are prosecuting as a felon who may very well be convicted in the next week. Right. And the reason they're desperate is because that possible future felon, who, by the way, I think this is all going down on appeal anyway, but that possible future felon, his numbers have been going up while he's in court. Yeah. Against your guy.
Again, it is the reverse. The longer that Biden is out on the stump and Trump is in court, not able to talk, it has this gag order, the better Trump does and the worse that Biden does. And again, I'm still thinking about the De Niro incident with because that really blew up. David Axelrod even wrote about it on CNN and said this is a bad idea. Oh, a role he should have turned down, David Axelrod said.
It's a kind way of putting it.
But I mean, no, and when you saw him getting worked up and you thought he was going to start dropping, because they're dropping F-bombs, the hecklers are, and they're baiting him. And at some point in time, he morphs into Robert De Niro, the character,
right.
The actor,
right.
and not the man himself. And at some point, I thought he was going to say, "You're nothing but a badge," from the Untouchables or whatever he says, or "Were you not a guest at the Tangiers," or something. I mean, it was just all worked up. And
and then if you saw the end of The Irishman, you know that this age is not cutting the strongest of figures, right? It's just a bad look.
No, the fight scene in the where he's kicking the guy, and they, and I don't know why they do this. This is a terrible idea.
This is he's talking about the de-aging
in the movie The Irishman, directed by Martin Scorsese. And so you have a 70-something-year-old Robert De Niro, supposedly in his 20s or 30s. Like, he may look smoother, but the build and the motion of it is definitely of an old man trying to kick a young guy in the curb.
You can watch that scene for a sense of what the press conference looked like, too. Do you want to read a little bit of this Schadenfreude-licious piece from Politico? A pervasive sense of fear has settled in at the highest levels of the Democratic Party over President Biden's re-election prospects, even among office holders and strategists who had previously expressed confidence about the coming battle with Donald Trump. All year, Democrats had been on a joyless and exhausting grind through the 2024 election. But now, nearly 5 months from the election, anxiety has morphed into palpable trepidation. We're like one paragraph in, and we've already run out of synonyms for how scared they are. Yeah. According to more than a dozen party leaders and operatives. And the gap between what Democrats will say on TV or in print and what they'll text their friends has only grown as worries have surged about Biden's prospects. You don't want to be that guy who is on the record saying we're doomed, or the campaign's bad, or Biden's making mistakes. Nobody wants to be that guy, said a Democratic operative in close touch with the White House and granted anonymity to speak freely. But Biden's stubbornly poor polling and the stakes of the election are creating the freakout, he said. This isn't, oh my God, Mitt Romney might become president. It's, oh my God, the democracy might end. Okay, a word with Mr. Anonymous Source.
Yeah.
What were you doing when Mitt Romney was running for president and Biden was saying that he was going to reinstate slavery?
Yes, he was going to put y'all, that would be Y''ALL, in front of a black audience.
Back in
chains.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so spare me that. By the way, look, I have many, many, many on the record quibbles with Trump as president and not president. People like this who claim suddenly that Mitt Romney was the safe and mature and correct option for the Republican Party, get out. GTFO, okay? Because we all know what you were doing when Mitt Romney was running. You were saying that he was the devil, that he killed grandmas.
And his running mate, Paul Ryan, is pushing old ladies in wheelchairs down the staircase.
Okay. Concern has metastasized in recent days as Trump jaunted to some of the country's most liberal territories, including New Jersey and New York, to woo Hispanic and black voters as he boasted improbably that he would win in those areas. Look, I got to say, I think he will make headway in some of these neighborhoods with working class black and Hispanic voters, probably mostly male. Now, does that matter to the electoral map? Not that much. Those are also low propensity voters, so you have to work to get them out. And I'm not sure that the Trump campaign is going to be doing that. Right. But as a psyop, it's definitely working.
Definitely. The idea that Trump is expanding the map puts Biden already on the defensive in an even worse situation, because there was talk about Minnesota being in play. And then suddenly, for example, Virginia. It was now mentioned because of a Roanoke College poll that showed Virginia to be a dead heat.
Well, in Virginia, it should be noted that Youngkin's operation is competent.
Very.
And so the state GOP has become more competent, making sure that low propensity voters get out to
vote.
We
still don't know who the running mate's going to be.
That's true. Another quote. Donors ask me on an hourly basis about what I think, an advisor said, calling it so much easier to show them. So while they read it, I can pour a drink. The advisor added, the list of why we, quote, could win is so small, I don't even need to keep the list on my phone.
Yeah. Yikes. But that all that is accurate, and we've been saying this all the time, because, you can't run in his record, so then he's just got to focus on Trump and being a threat to democracy.
Right.
But as all of these other things are coming out in the news regarding, the prosecution of Trump or the Hunter Biden stories with CEFC China Energy, people are thinking, well, wait a minute.
Yeah.
Aren't things bad already? And of course, you had the campus protests, and you have the way Biden's handling the crisis in Israel. I mean, so things are bad. And people are just going to look back into the 4 years. Again, if they look back on, were they better off 2016 to 2020 or 2017 to 21, particularly when it comes to inflation and the affordability of homes and immigration. Yeah.
Yeah, it's a pretty clear answer.
Yeah.
And by the way, Democrats, I think, have done themselves a disservice by not demanding COVID accountability. They just want to move on, unlike you and I, who are very hung up on it. But they just want to move on. But as a result, nobody holds 2020 against Donald Trump.
Yeah, no,
And
he gets a pass on that.
He did make mistakes.
Sure.
I think some of his mistakes are more forgivable because it was the early part of that game.
Nobody knew what was happening.
However, he definitely gets an asterisk on that year, and people remember the years before that. This is a scene from a fundraiser for a crowd of 300 with Massachusetts Governor Maura Healey as the headliner there, or hosting it. She says, "To those of you who opened up your wallets, thank you," said Healey, a Democrat in her first term. "We'd like you to open them up a little bit more and to find more patriots who believe in this country, who recognize and understand the challenge presented at this time." Laughter rippled through the room.
Wow.
That's a high-dollar fundraiser. That is
Laughter?
your most sympathetic crowd.
Yeah.
And that's like, are they?
Yeah.
My question is, are they laughing at the silliness of the democracy is under threat, or are they laughing at the challenge presented at this time, because the challenge is that the president may very well have pooped in his pants 2 weeks ago on camera?
Yeah, I mean, it's also
It's a real thing, guys.
It's also they could be laughing like, seriously, you want us to give you more money? So I don't know.
Yeah, that's a problem.
I
So
mean, we
one
don't know.
more great quote here, and this guy is named Pete Giangreco, a longtime Democratic strategist who's worked on multiple presidential campaigns. There's still a path to win this, but they don't look like a campaign that's embarking on that path right now. Please see this insane presser that we just talked about.
Right.
If the frame of this race is what was better, the 3.5 years under Biden or 4 years under Trump, we lose that every day of the week and twice on Sunday. Now, one would think that, I don't know, he and other Democrats might do some introspection about why things are so much worse under your policies versus his policies. That seems like something you might want to explore. But no,
there's
they
not
don't.
much they can do.
They don't seem ready to address that at all.
No, they really put themselves in this bind as well, because if the president is not at the top of his game physically or mentally, you would normally then turn to the vice president to carry to do the rest of the heavy lifting, because in people's minds, God forbid something happens to the president, at least it'll fall to Vice President Kamala Harris. And that's the problem. They felt like they needed her, but they didn't, and now they're stuck with her because she's not going anywhere.
The greatest insurance policy ever.
Yeah.
For Joe Biden. That's right. I also saw, I'm having trouble bringing it up, so I'm just going to paraphrase it, but I saw a poll result polling young people about the idea that things will, of course, fall off a cliff and democracy will end if Trump is elected. And in fact, they see what you and I see, which is like a whole, pantheon of clowns running this country on both sides, and that they don't trust either. And they think there's sort of like a dark and bad and incompetent tinge to all of this. Yeah. And I don't think that bodes well for Biden, nor does the headline I saw, I believe it was a New York Times, it was one of these breakdowns of like things the president's doing this week.
Oh,
Number 2, Biden's new strategy to win black voters. Ooh, if a Democratic president needs a new strategy to win black voters in May of a presidential election year, no, that's not good. That's not good.
Trump has been able to, he's been very persistent about this, and consistent, I should say, about chipping away at black support for the Democratic Party and for Biden, in particular because Biden is not somebody to be excited about.
Yes.
They know that. And we're talking about maybe 23% of black voters, certainly male black voters, who say that they would consider Trump If he gets that number to 25, like 1 in 4, seriously?
Well, and that's the thing. Is
And
like,
again, yet it is another front. Trump talks about expanding the map, and now they have to play defense on any number of these situations.
And that's the thing. Nobody should be like, oh, Trump's going to pull all these black voters that are showing up currently in some of the polls, right? These are small bits of polls that are hard to extrapolate, that are hard to. There will be consolidation in the future.
Right.
People
and turnout, as you mentioned.
People will come home. Turnout from Democrats for low propensity voters is always pretty well done. Republicans have not caught up on that front. And Trump does his part in saying only vote on election day, which doesn't help. But you don't have to peel off a bunch to make a difference.
That's right.
And if the Biden campaign is spending money and time doing things like wooing black voters, doing things like...
which they normally take for granted.
I know. Doing things like working to get on the ballot in Ohio, which they should have figured out sooner, they're not going to be spending time winning in battleground states.
And again, we're not talking about even traditionally Democratic voters switching over and voting for Trump. Like young people, they might just stay home.
Yeah, that's the thing.
And that's a problem for them.
They don't have to actually flip for it to be a problem. Once again, when Getting Hammered tapes, news breaks. You can count on it. So naturally, we recorded an entire episode addressing the deliberating jury in the Trump hush money trial brought by District Attorney Alvin Bragg in Manhattan. And that jury decided to promptly come back with a verdict, finding former President Donald J. Trump guilty on 34 counts of falsifying business records. Those crimes are misdemeanors that had already long passed their statute of limitations, but Bragg's office Frankensteined them into felonies by saying that they were in service of another crime, a crime which was presumed to be some kind of campaign finance violation, but which was not identified in the indictment, adjudicated in court, much less proven. Federal election violations are not in Bragg's purview, and this matter had already been investigated by the Federal Election Commission, which chose not to even fine Trump for it. Nonetheless, the Manhattan DA decided the first criminal prosecution of an American president should be predicated on this, frankly, ridiculous abuse of the law, with President Joe Biden's former number 3 guy at the Department of Justice literally prosecuting the case. So that it turns out, just as with Russiagate, everything Trump says about how he's being railroaded, targeted by liberal elites, abused by the deep state, is true. At least with Russiagate, they had the decency to try to hide what they were doing. Now they just let it all hang out. So here we are, with a verdict that is ripe for appeal in about 1,000 ways. That's not a technical term, but it's legit. A current president of the United States holding campaign events in front of the courthouse where his opponent may very well be literally sent to jail, and crowing about how all of this is in service of democracy. You have got to be kidding me. I am an optimistic person, sometimes too much so for my own good. I had hoped there would be 1 or 2 jurors who might redeem this process by seeing through it, seeing it for what it was. I don't know how voters will react. But political outcomes aside, I think this is a very bad result for the country. It will have really dark implications for the future and for trust in institutions that are already on life support. There will be lawfare retaliation, and I cannot blame anybody for engaging in it, frankly. There will be half the country that believes democracy was subverted no matter who wins in November. We were already there as a nation, but there's no way that this does not exacerbate cynicism of so many people, including me. I am sad and worried about it. Polls suggest that about 15 to 20% of people will be more likely to vote for Trump if convicted, and 20% less likely, while most won't change their allegiances. I hope that's true, just because it makes this circus less of an impact. Judge Merchan has scheduled Trump's sentencing for July 11th, days before the beginning of the Republican National Convention, in yet another very obvious and naked attempt to make this as political as possible. He may actually throw Trump in jail, despite this being a nonviolent crime and he a first-time offender. This would be one of the more shameful ironies, since Bragg's office, of course, famously doesn't put so many violent repeat offenders in jail. I used to wonder, who the heck are the people in this voting bloc who say they'd be more likely to vote for Trump if he were convicted? And now I wonder, am I one of them? At any rate, We're really going to have to start recording day of to make it through this election year. Stick with us on Getting Hammered. Shall we talk about SCOTUS?
Oh, boy.
Oh, man. Look, I kind of was hoping for this to blow over because it's so stupid, Vic. It's so stupid.
And we haven't talked about it until now.
We haven't, because I thought this made-up thing is going to disappear. But you know what? When the national media wants to have a conniption, as we call it in the South, when you lose your ever-loving mind as a child on the floor and cannot be stopped. When you have a conniption.
Is it conniption or conniption fit?
You could say both.
Okay.
Yeah.
Check.
When you have a conniption fit.
Thank you.
And the left has one, and the media plays along, we all get dragged into this made-up thing.
Yeah.
Currently, the made-up thing is often about SCOTUS because they don't like that they don't have control of the Supreme Court ideologically right now.
6-3 drives them nuts.
It's driving them crazy. And so they do everything they can to invalidate the one institution which still has quite a bit of public trust, by the way, after all the other ones have torpedoed themselves. This is about flags flying at two residences of Supreme Court Justice Samuel Alito. Okay. The first flag is an upside-down American flag that Justice Samuel Alito's wife flew briefly at their home in Virginia during the pandemic, during the time when SCOTUS homes were being protested, sometimes violently, like when the assassin showed up at Kavanaugh's house and was caught. And there was a pretty heated conflict between neighbors at that time.
And the neighbor who was very vocal and very offensive.
Well, and the neighbor had up signs that said Trump and all sorts of stuff. You can imagine.
And called her things.
Right. And called her the C word. At least someone at that household did. By the way, did you hear that the neighbor in question is a 35-year-old woman who moved back in with her parents? So she's not even the owner of the house. Okay? So someone has verbally assaulted
Do you have something better to do?
Mrs. Alito. It's this very pitched time in American history. She's feeling under siege, and she hangs the American flag upside down. Now, to my mind, this is a distress signal.
Right.
That's what the upside down American flag
There was
means.
a whole movie about this with Robert Redford and James Gandolfini.
Right.
It took place in a military prison.
It's a distress signal. Now, it can have connotations like, oh, are you being a little hyperbolic? Like, perhaps an upside down American flag is not the right move at this moment. So you can quibble with it.
Yeah.
But the argument from the left and from the media is that the upside down American flag was a signal that Mrs. Alito and Justice Alito are pro January 6th Stop the Steal, because the only thing that an upside down American flag can signify is stop the steal.
Right. Therefore, he and Clarence Thomas, of course, because of Ginny Thomas's opinions, cannot. They must recuse themselves from that particular trial.
Right. So interesting that this is coming up right before this important trial that the media and the left have a vested interest in the outcome. So, at any rate, by the way, the woman, Miss Baden, who is the neighbor, has admitted to calling Mrs. Alito the C word. But, you know, they're the victims in all of this. Anyway, go and live in your own home, 35-year-old woman.
And then in addition to that, of course, was the following story, the follow-up story, which I believe was also the New York Times, if I'm not mistaken, of an appeal to heaven flag.
Yes. So there's a second flag, which was flown at another residence, I believe a coastal residence of the Alitos, which is an appeal to heaven flag, which just has roots in the Revolutionary War.
Yep. The schooners, George Washington schooners.
Yeah, and I know that like the New York Times is unfamiliar, but during the founding, a lot of people just believed in God. Like that was a normal.
Shocking.
And in fact, to this, I know you.
Right.
I don't know if you know this.
What?
Vic, to this day in America, a lot of people believe in God. And
like 2 or 3%.
An appeal to heaven is actually not controversial.
No.
Nor is it as once again asserted by the left and the media, a January 6th symbol.
Yes, it's also a reference to John Locke's, I believe, the second treatise of government, which talks about that in terms of the right to revolution. But the revolution, that's it. That's why they had it up. We know what they're thinking. That's why we write. This is how we write these pieces. We see, and then we know what's in their minds.
Do you know how we know, by the way, that it was not a controversial flag until
How, Mary
recently?
Catherine?
Well, it was hanging. It was outside the San Francisco City Hall until this weekend, because no one sent the memo to the lefties in San Francisco that suddenly the new push to invalidate SCOTUS rulings was around this fake made-up thing about an Appeal to Heaven flag. So the city of San Francisco confirmed it had removed the Appeal to Heaven flag from outside City Hall over the weekend, just days after it was reported to have been flown outside a conservative Supreme Court justice's house.
Can't have it anymore.
On May 22nd, the New York Times reported Supreme Court Justice Alito flew the pine tree flag at his New Jersey vacation home last year and described it as a symbol of support for former President Donald J. Trump, for a religious strand of Stop the Steal campaign and for a push to remake American government in Christian terms. Y'all, let me be clear. You're out of your minds. You're out of your minds. The San Francisco Chronicle reported Wednesday that the Revolutionary War era flag was taken down after 60 years. It's so weird that the San Francisco liberals in government there were supporters of a religious strand of Stop the Steal campaign and a push to remake American government in Christian terms for the last 60 years. Yeah. That is so weird.
Also, the Washington Post thought about doing this piece and decided not to. And so several years had passed. And then the New York Times thought, now we got them dead to rights because we have the upside down flag. We have this flag. There is another flag, however, Mary Catherine. And I saw this on this one. They were waving this all throughout the Capitol on January 6th. The rioters, the insurrectionists, right? They're waving this flag. And I saw this flag as well. Nobody talks about this at the Alito residence and the compound. And they had the same flag. So it's like red, white, and blue. And then there's like 50 white stars in a corner on a blue background.
With many fringe groups.
No, apparently, I didn't know this, is a Christian nationalist, a white Christian nationalist flag. It was flown in January 6th at the Alitos in car dealerships.
Oh, car dealerships are in on it.
And they're huge.
By the way, I do want to give credit to Rachel Swan, who is the San Francisco Chronicle reporter who broke that. And this is the hilarious response she gets from city officials. City Parks officials said they removed the flag because while it first symbolized the quest for American independence, it has, quote, since been adopted by a very different group, one that doesn't represent the city's values. Yeah, that just happened this weekend when the left made up this thing.
So again, on January 6th, they're waving the American flag. Do they stop waving the American flag now? Because they ruined it? They ruined it for them?
Another person pointed out that the New York Times at one point did a deep dive on January 6th. Not just on January 6th, but the symbols thereof, and left out the Appeal to Heaven flag, even though it's in one of their pictures.
Yeah.
They don't address it because it turns out this is made up.
There's something called, again, the paper of record. The paper of record. It's supposed to be the best.
Up. By the way,
there's a thing called the internet, and they can look it up. It's a matter of choosing not to.
Well, yes. Well, the whole thing
destroys the narrative.
The whole thing is centered on to hang with the New York Times here. You got to believe that San Francisco City Hall had very good intentions the whole time and was very briefed on this, whereas they're just assuming bad intentions of Alito for flying the exact same flag.
Because, again, they know what's going on in people's minds.
So people in the Senate, Sheldon Whitehouse.
Oh, boy.
Senator Sheldon Whitehouse and Senator Richard Durbin sent a letter to Alito publicly asking him to recuse himself from this big case that's coming up, which is why this made-up thing is becoming a story. I just want to be very frank about it. It is nonsense. And so they sent him a request to recuse, and his response to them is in part, it's like a 2-page letter. A reasonable person who is not motivated by political or ideological considerations or a desire to affect the outcome, this is Alito's letter, of Supreme Court cases, would conclude that this event does not meet the applicable standard for recusal. I am therefore duty-bound to reject your recusal request. He also goes into great detail about the fact that his wife was in this dispute.
Yeah.
She hung the flag at their place in Virginia during this dispute. It did not come to his attention until after she had hung it. He asked her to remove it, and she said no. And then he goes on about how she is an independent-minded citizen.
She is.
She has freedom of speech. And in fact, the other home is in her name, and she is therefore able to fly anything she wants.
Well within her right.
At that vacation home. And I enjoyed the sort of like feminism stripe to this, where he's
there
like,
is a strong streak.
no, I will not be reining in my wife. Thank you.
Yeah. He might preside over, our nation's highest court, but she's at home.
Well, and then he sort
She's
of baited
top.
some lefties into being like, oh, I see this Supreme Court justice can't handle his wife. And it's like, oh, is that a thing you guys think should happen now?
Yeah.
Is that what you're into?
Right.
Trad marriage?
Yeah, suddenly.
Liberals?
Suddenly, no, they want it both ways. Again, this idea that he needs to recuse himself, they didn't seem to care in previous instances where judges at various levels had spouses that presented a conflict of interest. I think about Ruth Bader Ginsburg. She herself was very openly anti-Trump, but certainly didn't recuse herself from the Trump Mazars case. And then Judge Reinhart, the former judge who was a circuit court judge in California, during the gay marriage debates, his wife, she was like in the ACLU and submitted briefs to that case.
Yeah. No,
That's
it
okay.
doesn't matter. As long as it's from the left, it's fine. By the way, our friend John McCormick, who writes for The Dispatch, writes maybe one of the only headlines with a question mark for which the answer is yes. A double standard in Alito flag flap, question mark? Uh-huh. So he asks, why didn't Senate Democrats call for Ginsburg's recusal following her public comments opposing Trump during the 2016 campaign? Because I don't remember her doing that. And this is Tim Kaine speaking. And like, who said that she did that? Tim Kaine told the Dispatch, who's a senator from Virginia. When the Dispatch pointed out that those Ginsburg comments were made in on-the-record media interviews, Kaine replied, I don't know. I would have to see that to believe that's true. He asked several others as well. Did Blumenthal, for instance, who's now calling for recusal for Alito, call for recusal at the time? I don't remember whether I called for it at the time, Blumenthal replied. John, there is no record of Blumenthal or any Senate Democrat calling for Ginsburg to recuse herself from cases involving Trump. He went further and said, what Alito did was what he's done. I think there's a clear distinction. Of course you do. You think there's a clear distinction because there's a D. Yeah.
Exactly.
That's it. That's it.
Even Jeremy Raskin, of course, has weighed in with an op-ed. I believe the headline is "How to Remove Them from the Case."
There
from
you
this,
go.
From this trial. Yeah, so there you go.
Things are going great, guys. Anyway, there's an obvious analogous incident here where it turns out none of these guys cared because they don't actually care about anything except for invalidating the court and delegitimizing the court. And good for Alito for just saying, nope.
For now, but the onslaught's going to be relentless. Rolling Stone has some story on Amy Coney Barrett's husband, Jesse.
Oh, no, we just got to move to the next one.
Yeah, absolutely.
Got to move to the next
Disclose
one.
all your clients because they did that for the liberal justices.
Oh, all the time, yeah. I wanted to note there also was an important Supreme Court ruling this week, and it was funny how CNN frames it. The headline is, Supreme Court sides with NRA in free speech ruling that curbs government pressure campaigns. Well, yes, because free speech should come before government pressure campaigns, you ding-dongs.
And that was, by the way, a unanimous ruling.
Oh, was that unanimous?
The opinion was written by the majority opinion written by Sotomayor.
Get a grip. Get a grip, you dum-dums.
This horrible 6-3 divide. Look at this.
Look at this. Yes, Supreme Court on Thursday unanimously backed the National Rifle Association in a First Amendment ruling that could make it harder for state regulators to pressure advocacy groups. That's good. That's good, CNN. Let me help you with that. The decision means the NRA may continue. By the way, just make it Human Rights Watch and decide if you like it. You know?
Hey, flip it and see how you feel.
Yeah, just flip it. Make it ACLU. Make it a Planned Parenthood. The NRA may continue to pursue its lawsuit against a New York official who urged banks and insurance companies to cut ties with the gun rights group following the 2018 mass shooting at Parkland, Florida, a high school that left 17 people dead. quote, government officials cannot attempt to coerce private parties in order to punish or suppress views that the government disfavors. Justice Sonia Sotomayor, the most senior liberal, wrote for the court. Oh, that's got to be a lot of tears. A lot of tears on that one.
I think they don't want to talk about that.
Somebody who knows how free speech works. That's cool. That's cool. I'm glad to see that every now and then.
I guess they'll have to have an appeal to heaven.
Oh my gosh, are we almost out of time?
We are, Mary Catherine, but we can save some stuff for later if you like, or we can discuss
You know
it
what?
now.
I do just want to note another thing that I feel like would be a large story if it was an R next to his name. The Hunter Biden case is ongoing. And he attempted a last-ditch effort to get his gun charges thrown out, and it did not work. In his various legal troubles, a major witness is Hallie Biden, who was married to Beau.
Yes,
but then the widow had a dalliance with Hunter Biden. Actually, I think it was a fairly long relationship during all those tumultuous times. And President Joe Biden, this is Yahoo reporting, has reportedly visited his son Hunter Biden's ex, Hallie, who is a critical witness in his upcoming gun trial. Hunter is facing 3 felony charges stemming from an incident in 2018. According to reports, Biden did not discuss the trial with his son's ex, although his visit has raised eyebrows due to the awkward optics. It was also a nighttime visit, by the way. He paid an unexpected late-night visit to his son's ex, Hallie, on Sunday.
Surprise!
It comes days before she would take the stand to testify in Hunter's federal trial, where he is facing multiple counts of weapon-related charges. Also, did you know that Hunter Biden was at yet another state dinner along with the head of the DOJ, who is in charge of prosecuting this case, and by the way, tried to get away with not prosecuting it by doing all sorts of shady stuff.
That's right.
And we wouldn't be here except for the whistleblowers and that blessed judge who was like, this plea deal is not going to work for me.
Mary Ellen Noreika.
Uh-huh. There you go. Anyway, just saying, late night visit to Hallie.
I think it's presumptuous of you, Mary Catherine, to assume it wasn't just, hey, a little coffee and cake, maybe, a little tea.
Well, he claims, and this is how they...
Oh, yeah, always because of...
No, this is how they get out of everything.
Yes, they do, yeah.
It is so blatant and gross. He, quote, visited her because of the approaching 9th anniversary of her late husband, Beau's death. Get out of here with that. I would
timing. It's just the timing.
I'm gonna need pictures from all of the other anniversary visits he did with Hallie.
Yeah.
That didn't coincide with his son's trial.
It reminds me of this is kind of not really related, but I'll throw it out here anyway. When the press used to really have it in for Marion Barry, the great former mayor of Washington, D.C., as you know. And they were staked out, and twice they caught Marion Barry out late at night. And one was he was at a female staffer's house at 11 p.m. And as he's walking out, and the press, of course, is there waiting for him, asking him, "What are you doing here?" And he said, "Oh, I just wanted to say hi to her daughter, her 3-year-old daughter, at 11 p.m."
11 p.m.
And then the other one was, of course, when he was at the strip club. And they said, "What are you doing here?" Of course, and that was much later. And he said 2 things. He says, 1, I'm a night owl, okay?
I mean, fair.
And 2, he said, it's not a strip club. He said, this is like, it's an erotic dance club or something, he said. It was just, he called it something. It was something else. That's all it is. That's all it is.
All right, one last update before we go. Scottie Scheffler charges against the PGA golfer dropped.
Whoa.
Because
he was arrested in an orange jumpsuit. And what happened?
Well, it turns out that the video evidence that we discussed showed that the detective Gillis had at the very least exaggerated a ton about what happened. And they won't be pressing charges.
Unbelievable.
Yeah.
Good for Scott. I knew that about him. Did you want to talk about, isn't it National something Day, that time of the month day? Or month? That time of the month? Is it the whole month dedicated to it? Or is it,
you wouldn't know because
I wouldn't know.
You're not a menstruator.
I wouldn't know.
Hold on. Let's bring this up. The Department of Labor having a normal one. By the way, just as I keep saying, voters just want you to be normal for like 3 seconds.
Yeah.
And nobody can do it. Here's the Department of Labor. Menstruation affects half the U.S. workforce, but talking about it at work can be taboo. For Menstrual Hygiene Day, here are 5 easy actions employers can take to help menstruators thrive at work. Okay, you can just call us women. Just because a tiny percentage of women identify as men does not mean that we are menstruators. I reject this label. I reject it. It's so gross. Nope. And I also reject talking to your coworkers about your period.
You know,
Nope.
I'm not even sure if I should enter this
Should I
conversation
put a trigger
or,
warning on that for
or
the
not.
kids?
Yeah.
For the kids?
No, I might
Oh my
just
gosh.
leave it there. I was going to say, but it started with pregnant people.
It's so
And
stupid.
what they want to do is normalize the normalization of the absurdity. And so if they say it enough times, then all of a sudden it's like, it'll seem so outdated if you ever said,
Well, and it's so funny because
a menstruating woman or a pregnant woman.
Right. Well, they always say like, none of this affects you.
Mm-hmm.
Like, why are you complaining? This doesn't affect you. It does, because I don't want to be called a menstruator.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
I don't want to be called a pregnant person. So how about you observe my preferences?
Right.
How about that?
All right. I don't know. What do our listeners think? They think they've had enough of this?
People have some thoughts on that.
Okay. Well, we'll leave it at that, period. Do you have any other thoughts, Mary Catherine? Anything else you want to talk about, or are we good?
I will note, Steve pointed this out to me, that Gillis noted that he had $80 pants on that were scraped during the incident. With
Well,
Scottie
who's going to?
Scheffler
Well, Scottie Scheffler is not going to have to pay for that. No, I was going to say, but wasn't he banging his mag light, his flashlight, on Scottie Scheffler's car? I bet there was damage to that.
Yeah.
Should pay for that.
All right.
Okay.
We're done.
Oh, I wanted to do a rest in peace. In peace to Red Lobster.
Oh, yes.
We never got a chance to talk
Yeah,
about
honestly,
this.
I'm surprised our audience has not been clamoring.
I know. Clamming? Oh, clamoring. Yes. Sorry. Forgive her, folks. She's a little baked. The owner of Red Lobster. This is very interesting. So the news is Red Lobster they've declared bankruptcy. Okay. Very sad for those of us who have gone to Red Lobster. I used to go with my family.
For those
in the
cheesy biscuits.
90s. I don't remember the biscuits at all. I do remember, yes, Jennifer, they had biscuits. But I do remember before we went off to college, my high school buddies, we all had a big dinner there. And we all thought, let's see if we could try to get away with ordering alcohol. Because, you drink at Red Lobster. And so somebody ordered, of course, the very manly strawberry daiquiri. The 18-year-old guys, there's nothing suspicious about that.
No, not at all.
And we all go around, and she's just taking our order. I'm like, oh, my gosh, this is so awesome. And she goes, okay, I just need some ID. Oh, no, I'm sorry. I mean, virgin daiquiri. But actually, the funniest thing was an actual real daiquiri slipped into the order. And, man, that thing was passed around so fast. I was drunk so fast. Now, let me just say this. One of the reasons, part of it was the pandemic, and they never recovered from the pandemic. Right. Listeners know you and I do our part.
Oh, for sure.
To help restaurants.
I was
but
out there.
We couldn't do it for Red Lobster. We couldn't save him. The other problem was this idea that the owner had of $20 all-you-can-eat shrimp.
Yes.
And it's not, I don't know how they gamed this out, but it's clearly the price point, taking into account inflation and all the other ancillary costs. You're going to they lost $11 million on that. Now, here's the interesting thing. The owner.
Do you think maybe it was a Columbia grad running those calculations who had majored in Jew hatred or something and just didn't have the skills?
That's right. Now, he was focused elsewhere at the time.
But he had that Columbia degree.
The interesting thing about the owner having come up with this idea, which turns out to be a terrible idea, in my opinion, just because of the price point. But then again, if you charged more, people would say, if I'm going to pay that, I'm going to go to some other restaurant, right? But the owner also happens to own another company called Thai Union, which provides the shrimp to Red Lobster.
Oh, interesting.
Interesting is all I'm saying. Okay.
We should go for a last dinner to Red Lobster, lest it actually shut down. In these bankruptcy things, they don't always come to an end. Like,
No,
it'll
no.
be passed along to somebody else. So we'll see. Those cheesy biscuits better stay. Okay.
Okay. That wraps up this episode of Getting Hammered. Remember, you can subscribe to us on iTunes, Google Play, and YouTube. You can follow me on Twitter at Victorina Mattis.
I'm at MK Hammer on Twitter, at MK Hammer Time on Instagram. You can follow the show at Getting Hammered Podcast on Instagram and YouTube. And you should. You can see my new haircut. I know. It is very enticing. Thanks for getting hammered responsibly. This has been a Nebulous Media Podcast.